Okay.
Leanne Kemp, thank you so much for uh, having this chat with me this morning. We're featuring you in Intrapreneur magazine. So we're just having a conversation to get to know you a little bit more and your wonderful work that you're doing, but also to get your take on intrapreneurialism. So this is our article for Intrapreneur magazine. Now, just to give a little bit of intro before we actually start our conversation about entrepreneurialism, you are Queensland's chief entrepreneur and have a remarkable history of doing amazing things with your company called Everledger, which you're the CEO and the founder of. And before you became Queensland's chief entrepreneur, you've had a huge list of successes to your name, including the Innovator of the Year in 2018 at the Women in IT Awards. You're an appointed member of the World Economic Forum's Global Blockchain Business Council. You're the co-chair of the World Economic Forum's Advanced Manufacturing and Sustainable Production Working Group. Your company, Everledger, is doing next generation technology that is just pushing the boundaries on every front. So what about if, just before we jump into talking about entrepreneurialism, tell us a little bit about yourself and Everledger and what's brought you to this point.
Well, I began my career in 1996 and started working in RFID technology, so that's radio frequency identification. I managed to understand the technology relatively well and hold some patents in the disciplines of that technology for supply chain. And of course, a number of years later, here I am, find myself working yet again with the breakthrough technology, this time blockchain, combining actually RFID and providing for a platform of provenance for the traceability of diamonds, and then moving on to other precious gemstones, metals and minerals. So we're interested in opaque supply chains where transparency and provenance is paramount to authenticity and an ethical trade platform. So my career has sort of spanned many decades of technology. So I've seen the wave of social ad tech. Of course, now more recently, we're starting to see the outbreak of the next generation of the internet itself.
Yes, yep, remarkable work. And so your role as chief entrepreneur, I know, is very much around helping startups to get some traction for their work and boost the Queensland economy. But I do believe that intrapreneurialism, as we talked about once before when we met at the event at Griffith University, is also a key activity for our economic well-being. So do you think that that would be a fair statement? How do you feel about intrapreneurialism as a contributor to our state's economy?
Well, as it's so, the timing is completely ironic because I just delivered the graduation ceremony for Griffith for the class of 2019 on the Gold Coast on Saturday.
Okay.
And part of my delivery speech to them was less about choosing the career path of being an entrepreneur, or even, to be honest with you, having the career path of an intrapreneur. Was more about what is the inherent skills that sit within entrepreneurialism or to be an entrepreneur. And I really came down to sort of two major points. And the first is to move beyond resiliency. You know, to have resiliency is one thing. It's to be able to withstand the pressure of environment. But to be honest with you, if you are an incredible entrepreneur or even an intrapreneur, it's the ability to form anti-fragility, a muscle strength that enables you to be able to learn through failures or through challenges and experiments. So this anti-fragility skill set is a consistent skill set that would exist within an entrepreneur that applies its skills in an externality, or an intrapreneur which will apply it within an existing organization. And the second skill set I spoke about was not just to reflect, but to form an understanding of reflexivity, which through the componentry of reflection, having that willingness to enable change and the change of direction. So these were the two pieces of conversations that I think were incredibly powerful to deliver in the graduation ceremony. And what I found was the parents actually after the, it was really interesting. The parents of the graduates came up to me and said, I'm in a work environment and everything you said, all the things that I'm trying to do or need to do inside of my own company. So unbeknownst to me, I was addressing the future entrepreneurs of our state, but actually I was also addressing at that very same time the intrapreneurs that sit within organizations today. They're the parents of our leading entrepreneurs of the future.
Yes, that's really interesting. Did you actually use the word intrapreneur during your speech?
Not on my speech, because I was most surprised that that actually the unintended consequence of my speech was I was there to address the children. I was there to address those that were graduating. But unbeknown to me, actually the intrapreneurs, those silent voices in the room were the people that called out the most and resonated with the messaging.
Isn't that interesting? Because I'm finding that this message and this movement is gaining so much traction. People are really ready to talk about this and really ready to hear about it. So how much recognition do you think intrapreneurialism is now getting? Do you find that that maybe people are talking about it, but without actually using that term, given your experience just recently? Maybe we need to educate people around the language of that so that they can actually start identifying as intrapreneurs. Have you noticed any shift in that sort of thing at all?
So look, I definitely think there's a disconnect between the change makers within organizations, those that can see solutions to challenges, those that are inherently built to innovate within. They want to live in a constant state of change. These skill sets, of course, live on in various existing roles within organizations, whether that be within a technology realm or, of course, within a head of product, because to be a head of product, you would need to be able to consistently and continuously innovate. I think we're not really putting a name on it, and you're right. I believe that there probably is a lot more room to be able to amplify and bring up leading exemplars, examples, not just within the how or the what was innovated, but the people that sat behind it, that imagined the creativity process, the design thinking, and then not just about the design thinking, but how do they enact the change?
Yes.
Because intrapreneurs are incredibly social apt beasts in that they understand the human elements that are required to describe the change in a safe environment to enable those to follow as they lead.
Yes, that's very much the case. I often refer to intrapreneurs as the dreamers who do. In other words, they are those people within organisations who can use their creativity to conceptualise new ways of doing things and progress new ideas, but they don't leave it at that. They actually take action and get things done. And that, of course, takes a lot of people skills. So we've talked about the similarities in the skill sets between intrapreneurs and entrepreneurs. Are there any differentiators in your opinion? Are there things that we'd say, well, intrapreneurs need to really be able to do this, whereas entrepreneurs perhaps don't need that particular skill? Are there things that would differentiate them as much as unite them?
I think that the only difference between an intrapreneur and an entrepreneur is the environment or the context that they're creating the change. And if you're an incredible entrepreneur, you too could be an amazing intrapreneur, and vice versa.
And vice versa, yeah, exactly.
There is probably, if I was to say, it would be easier, I believe, for probably an entrepreneur to act within an intrapreneur environment, because to a certain extent, entrepreneurs are without funding. They're creating ideas, they're bootstrapping, there's never enough resourcing. But certainly in an intrapreneur environment, if you're talking around design thinking in large corporations, to when you can have a comparative thinking around the resources that are available to a startup that's a single founder versus an organization that might have existing material assets to use and leverage, you're in somewhat of a privileged place to be able to design and innovate.
Yes.
That's not to take away from intrapreneurs themselves, because I do think intrapreneurs that start out on the entrepreneurial journey also have to construct themselves in a life circumstance. So to literally jump off the proverbial cliff, as they say, where there isn't any financial security, there's no environment upon which you can really guarantee success, this becomes a part of the inbuilt bravery that one, I guess, has to calibrate against the backdrop of life's commitments, family, children, mortgages, etc.
Yeah, absolutely, exactly. Do you have any specific examples where you've seen this played out? Intrapreneurial examples, I mean, within any organisations that you've come across, or even potentially within Everledger? Because I know that your recruitment practices are very much around recruiting intrapreneurs. So your company, your global company, in fact, has a culture of intrapreneurialism. So do you have any case studies or examples that you could share with us, either from your own company or any others you've come across?
Sure. So, I mean, I've had 3 lived experiences with Queensland companies. One, Suncorp Insurance, second, RACQ, and the third, Bank of Queensland.
Right.
And what I've seen in those environments is a separated environment, firstly, an innovation space that enables the design thinking, the test and failure to occur in a place that's safe, safe from the business as usual processes and procedures. I've also witnessed within those organisations top level commitment from the CEO, COO, and of course they've enabled data to be made available for these test changes to become enlivened. So I think this is a really interesting skill set and mix to be able to bring together. And that's where I've seen 3 examples. Internally in Everledger, our entrepreneurship runs in a fairly different way, in so much that we are a startup, we're 4.5 years old. We often encourage, and we've just had the first, our head of India operations is very keen to be able to take the wholeness of his skills and spin up a Everledger enabled company. So what I mean by that is he's very keen to be able to take the lived experience of Everledger and now bring up an organization that isn't blockchain. It's actually in a design part of the industry. But he, of course, has been spun out from Everledger to run up effectively his own company and still act across a bridge back into Everledger from India. So this is the first of what I think is going to be amazing. If we have, 5 or 6 Everledger enabled companies, then I'm pretty happy that we've done the right thing.
That is intrapreneurialism embodied.
I don't know, right? I think it's just a way of also giving back and understanding how true entrepreneurs really think. And sometimes it's best to enable them the space and the trampoline to fly.
Absolutely. Thank you. So just as we wrap up, do you have any advice that you think would be particularly salient and timely for intrapreneurs right now?
I was asked the question, I addressed the innovation network across Queensland government more recently, and one of the topics they asked me to talk about was failure. And I said the biggest failure is doing nothing. This sort of static nature, just sitting sedimentary, is where failure truly occurs, not at the nexus point of test and fail. Because if you do move beyond a point of resiliency into anti-fragility and you're learning through this muscle exchange, then of course the failure becomes the next foundation towards the solution. So I believe the biggest issue is, how do you enable a place where not just failure is rewarded, but actually doing nothing is something that should be frowned upon. We have to continuously move towards a place of momentum. But in intrapreneurship, to really hone in on the people enablement skills to bring those that are not yet inclined to vision the future on a safe journey, to show them incremental reasonings as to why this is sound, a sound vision, a sound methodology. This will help more so in intrapreneurship. It's unlikely that organizations that have a business as usual construct will enable or be brave enough, to be honest with you, to truly disrupt themselves. The disruption likely occurs from entrepreneurship, whereas intrapreneurship provides for an incremental, yet exponential in value change within an organization or within an industry as a whole.
Yep. Leanne, thank you so much. That's wonderful. Did you have any final comments you want to make before we wrap up?
Well, I'm just looking forward to finding those intrapreneurs, the ones that go to work at 9 and sit with a curiosity and a burning desire to make change, but often find a disconnect towards the how and become frustrated when there are you know, 10 people in the room and 9 people say no, and they're the ones who feel as though they're the only ones that think in this certain way. So, you know, to those that are out there that think like that, you're an intrapreneur and an entrepreneur, but nonetheless, you're making the change that you want to see in the world. So well done.
Absolutely wonderful. And looking forward to having you open the Australian Intrapreneur Summit at the Brisbane Convention Centre in 2020. So thank you very much for that, and we'll see you then. Thank you.
Yeah, see you then. Happy days. Bye.
Bye-bye.